Hello and welcome to Lore of the Cards, the series that looks to find the lore hidden in your Hearthstone deck. I was planning on making Cho'Gall the subject of today's episode, but reading the comments of the Ancient One, I decided to change it up. It seemed a majority of you wanted to learn about someone different sooner, and it's for that reason that today we'll be covering the Twin Emperor Vek'lor. Since he's a twin, it's impossible to talk about Vek'lor without referring to his brother Vek'Nilash, the minion the Vek'lor card can summon. Their art was drawn by Sass, who we've covered multiple times on this series. If you like his work, check him out. His website will be in the description below. Vek'lor and Vek'Nilash were emperors of the Qiraji, descendants of the Akir. The Akir once served the old gods that ruled primordial Azeroth, who drenched the world in a miasma of corruption. The Akir were one of the first to fall at the hands of the Titanforged, servants of the righteous Titans, in their fight against the old gods. The Akir's burrows were caved in, driving them to the surface, where they did battle with the Titanforged in the open. The Titanforged were initially taken back by the viciousness of the Akir, but eventually won out over the insectoids, obliterating their race and leaving few alive. Those that lived were able to create even deeper burrows to survive, but the race was far too weakened to be of any further service to their masters. The Akir would remain hidden away beneath the earth for many ages, until 16,000 years before the Orcs first set foot on Azeroth. Events we now know more about since the release of Warcraft Chronicle. The face of Azeroth had changed significantly since the old gods' defeat and imprisonment at the hands of the Titanforged. The dominant force upon Azeroth now were the Trolls. At the base of the sacred Zandalar mountains was a small gathering of blackened stones. Witchdoctors and priests of all troll tribes forbade any troll from disturbing these stones, as they had been informed by their gods, the animalistic Loa, that grave consequences would follow. Eventually, rebellious and inquisitive trolls dared to get a closer look at the stones. They discovered that the stones were not stones after all, but the hardened hide of a massive creature. Coming to the conclusion the creature was a buried Loa, the trolls did all they could to wake it. Since the other Loa appeared to fear this one, it must have been a Loa of supreme power. The trolls performed living sacrifices and other vile rituals to wake the sleeping god. Once it woke from its slumber through the offerings of blood, the creature that rose before the trolls was no Loa, but the Kith'ix, a general that had once served the old gods, belonging to a race more commonly known as the Faceless ones. Kith'ix had been released after his master Yogg Saron's imprisonment. In the service of one of the Titan's greatest servants, a Watcher, he was tasked to pursue and kill two rival Watchers. Kith'ix and Zakaj chased the Watchers Arcadus and Tyr, but when they met with Tyr in combat, Zakaj was killed and Kith'ix heavily injured, forcing the Kith'raxi into hibernation to recover, though Tyr was also destroyed. After brutally slaughtering the trolls that had roused him from his slumber, Kith'ix surveyed the land. The pitiful troll kingdom filled the Faceless with disdain. It paled in comparison to the glorious Black Empire of the old gods. Deciding that seeing the troll kingdom reduced to ashes would please his masters, Kith'ix reached out with his mind, searching for an army to bind to his will. Hiding beneath the land, he found the Akir. Kith'ix rallied the Akir swarms to create a subterranean empire called Akir. The Faceless patiently waited as the Akir established their kingdom and built their ranks. When the Faceless deemed the Akir ready, he commanded they leave their burrows and swarm over the surface of Azeroth. The unrelenting Akir made good ground against the trolls, quickly dispatching several of the smaller tribes at the fringes of troll territory. Seeing that the Akir were coming dangerously close to their sacred Zandalar mountains, the Zandalar tribe formed the Empire of Zul, uniting all troll tribes into a single force to fight the Akir. As the Akir attempted to mount a siege upon the Zandalar mountains, the trolls attacked using guerrilla tactics and more direct forms of assault. The troll priests requested aid from the Loa, and the beasts answered their call. The Akir were driven into retreat, and Kith'ix suffered grievous wounds from a Loa. Although they drove back the Akir's attack, the trolls still had many bloody battles yet to fight. Killing a large number of Akir was not enough, as the survivors would burrow beneath the ground and establish another colony and attack anew. Territory needed to be entirely purged of the Akir. Troll tribes separated, claiming and fortifying any territory they won from the Akir as their own. The Gurubashi claimed much of the southern lands and descended upon the ancient Titan facility, Qiraji. As the massive Gurubashi army mounted an attack, they were surprised at what the Akir had discovered in Qiraji. Titan forged. Tol'vir and the Anubisath that dwelt within had been enthralled and all answered to their Akir leaders. The Anubisath were highly effective against the mass gathering of trolls, able to strike down many with a single powerful strike. After their calamitous first assault, the Gurubashi, advised by the Zandalari, split into smaller assault groups. This allowed the Gurubashi to continuously harass the Akir over time, eventually wearing them down. The Gurubashi claimed absolute control of the surrounding territory, but were unable to breach the walls of Qiraji. The Armani tribe were able to hunt down and kill Kith'ix. Despite the death of the Faceless one, the war raged on for several centuries. Without their leader, the Akir fought with less ferocity, and the trolls were able to wipe out a large portion of the Akir. Those that survived fortified their underground colonies. Some Akir even lost interest before the end of the war, heading south. These would later become the Mantid. Eventually, the trolls proclaimed themselves victors over the Akir. Qiraji, where a group of the surviving Akir had taken up permanent residence, was not just a mere Titan facility. Beneath it lay the imprisoned old god, Cthulhu. The god's presence slowly warped the Akir over time, transforming them into the Qiraji. There is no confirmation as to how long-lived Akir are, so whether an unevolved Vek'lor participated in the Akir Troll War can only be speculated. What is factual is that he and his brother would rise through the ranks to become the emperors of the Qiraji. Next to nothing is known about the Twin Emperors and their reign, as the surviving Akir descendants kept a low profile after their defeats, all but vanishing from the records of history. The Emperors would come to rule an insectoid kingdom of diverse individuals. Qiraji take many shapes, not just that of the Scarab cultist we see in Hearthstone. This particular type would appear to be the prophets and spellcasters of their people. Qiraji soldiers resemble beetles, bulky bodies with jagged exoskeletons. They use their pincers to attack, rather than forged weaponry. A female variety of Qiraji resembles a human with wings, though they may look monstrous beneath their veil. Vek'lor and his brother are the only two of their kind to look as they do, possibly a reflection of their age or status. It was not just the Qiraji that made up Vek'lor's subjects, but also a lesser insectoid race, the Silithid. Like the Qiraji, there are flyers and soldiers among this species. They do not have the mental capacity for spell work, but do have a third variety, workers. These were the lowly drones of the Qiraji Empire, making up a bulk of their army and workforce, treated as disposable assets by the emperors. The origins of the Silithid race has become unclear. According to the prophecy of Cthulhu, written by the prophet Scarab, they were born from the magical energies of the Well of Eternity that lay at the centre of Azeroth. The prophecy then goes on to state that Cthulhu brought the race under his thrall, selecting avatars among them and changing them into the Qiraji. We know from chronicles that this is not true. Perhaps the Silithid are a lesser evolution of Qiraji, the race passing through this state of development before Cthulhu chose them for a greater purpose, though that's just speculation. Vek'lor and Vek'Nilash were by far the most powerful of their race, those specialising in opposing forms of combat. Vek'lor was a spellcaster, capable of casting a variety of magic from many different schools, able to summon blizzards, create arcane explosions, cast shadow bolts, and use lesser creatures as a weapon, causing them to erupt in a fantastic fiery display. While Vek'Nilash's spell work was limited, he was able to mutate lesser creatures to fight for him. He made up for it in strength. He could swing a sword that equalled him in size with ease. Vek'Nilash also had an impervious resistance to all magic schools, except the power of the Holy Light. Both brothers were highly intelligent, keen tacticians, and were inseparable. Together, the Twin Emperors were near invincible, and just by being close to one another, wounds they sustained were healed at a rapid rate. The embodiment of Cthulhu's power, those within Qiraji served the Twin Emperors without question. It would be approximately 15,075 years since their ancestors' defeat at the hands of the Trolls before Azeroth would be reminded of the Qiraji's existence. They had lain dormant in their kingdom. The Trolls were no longer the dominant race of Azeroth, as that title had been passed to the Night Elves. Records of Qiraji's existence had been lost, due to the fact that the fortress lay at the end of the near inhospitable Silithid Desert. Looking to bring life to the desert, the Archdruid Fandral Staghelm sent a small group of druids along with his son Valstan to Silithid, hoping they could transform the barren desert into a lush forest. Wandering the desert, the group rediscovered Qiraji. Though some druids of the group attempted to dissuade him, Valstan entered the ancient city. Valstan's presence within the cold, lifeless halls of Qiraji inadvertently woke the Qiraji. The insectoids awake, Cthulhu became aware of their presence. Seizing the possibility of escaping his prison to rule Azeroth again, the maddening whispers of Cthulhu drove the Qiraji into a murderous frenzy. Within moments, the Twin Emperors were able to organise their people. Valstan, who had escaped Qiraji, looked on with horror as the ancient fortress swelled with the great swarms of the Qiraji. Valstan and his companions established a small outpost in Silithid to keep watch on Qiraji and requested aid from Fandral. Without warning, an army spilled from Qiraji, engulfing the desert. This army was led by the towering Qiraji warrior, Rajax, hand-picked by the Twin Emperors. Luckily for Valstan, his father had been able to make it to him in time. After the Qiraji's seemingly unstoppable first push, under Fandral's leadership, the elves were able to hold. The push into one another's territory and the constant shift of the front lines back and forth resulted in a conflict that would come to be known as the War of the Shifting Sands. The Qiraji would often win out through huge numbers, their physical power bolstered by the Anubisath within their ranks, but through cunning and guile, the elves were able to hold against their numbers, forever inspired by Fandral's firm leadership. Realising they could not break the elves with numbers alone, Vek'lor and Vek'Nilash formulated a plan to crush the will of the elven leader from their sanctuary in Qiraji. Despite their phenomenal power, the emperors did not participate in combat directly. One elven attack was able to push the Qiraji all the way back to the Silithid desert. During this push, the Qiraji appeared to perform a desperate counterattack on the elven outpost of Southwind Village. Valstan volunteered to stop this counter, but the Qiraji retreat had been a feint. As Valstan defended the outpost, more Qiraji sprung out from their hiding places beneath the sand, capturing Fandral's son. The Night Elves had been able to push all the way to the gates of Qiraji, but Rajax strode from the fortress, Valstan gripped between one of his almighty claws. Before Fandral's eyes, his son was ripped in two, breaking the druid's will. With their leader's morale failing, the Qiraji now pushed the elves back with ease, all the way out to the Tanaris desert. Drunk on the blood of elves, the Qiraji were unrelenting, so much so that they even attacked the sanctuary of the bronze dragons within Tanaris, the Caverns of Time. This new potent magical enemy within the elven ranks, the overconfident Qiraji's push, was stifled yet again. The Anubisath Assyrian was able to land a decisive blow against one of the strongest dragons, Gracaron, bringing him down to the ground, allowing the scuttling Qiraji to swarm over the beast. No, not before Gracaron tore Assyrian's body to shreds. Recognising Assyrian's achievements and knowing the champion's return would increase the morale of his forces, Vek'Nilash reformed Assyrian's broken body into a new variety of Anubisath called a Horusath. While very powerful, Assyrian could not stray from the strange crystals that acted as his life support system, binding him to the fortress of Qiraji. Despite Assyrian's stand, the dragons ran rampant. The Qiraji were not prepared to deal with creatures of such great magical strength, and were slaughtered by the thousands. The Twin Emperors were again able to devise a solution. The Tol'vir were implemented as the ideal counter to the dragon's great magical energy. The Tol'vir, which would come to be known as Obsidian Destroyers, were able to drain magical energy and unleash what they had drained in a devastating attack, making them particularly effective against the dragons. The Destroyer's creation had once been credited to Vek'lor, though we now know the Tol'vir were enthralled Titanforged. It's possible that Vek'lor, seeing the threat of the dragons, redesigned the Tol'vir to adapt to the changing forces of his enemy. This makes sense, as surely beings of such power would have been implemented before the dragons joined the war. We do know that the Twin Emperors created their own destroyer from scratch. Vek'lor masterminded its design, and Vek'Nilash used his considerable strength to craft the body from obsidian. It is believed that the destroyer Moam's creation was after the War of the Shifting Sands. However, if it was before, maybe Moam's creation acted as a blueprint for Vek'lor to redesign the abilities of the already existing Tol'vir. Either way, with the destroyers in the fray, the elves and the Bronzeflight needed to request aid from the other dragonflights. With an almighty push back against the Qiraji, in which thousands lost their lives, the elves and dragons were able to force the Qiraji back into Qiraji and seal them within their fortress, the Scarab wall preventing them from leaving. The bronze dragon Anachronos, son of Nozdormu, forged 2 artifacts, the Scarab Gong and the Scepter of the Shifting Sands. Should the need arise, the gong could be struck by the scepter to allow access to Qiraji. The scepter was entrusted to Fandral. Still mourning the loss of his son, the druid in his frustration shattered the scepter and the pieces were lost for 1,000 years. While they were defeated, the Qiraji did not rest. Vek'lor and Vek'Nilash rebuilt their forces, and Cthulhu slowly shook off the bonds of his prison. It's during this time that it's widely considered Moan was created, as the construct's great power was fueled by 3 captive dragons Cthulhu had bound to the fortress. It is also believed in this time that Vek'Nilash ordered his champion Assyrian to keep a close eye on Rajax. The emperors were furious at Rajax's failure to defeat the elves and dragons, and Vek'Nilash commanded Assyrian to kill the general should he dare fail them again. For another age, the Qiraji harboured deep resentment for their defeat at the hands of the elves. 1,000 years later, the Qiraji would once again become a thorn in the world of Azeroth's side. A small number of the insectoids were able to breach the Scarab wall. To prevent any more incursions, the heroes of Azeroth, after a massive combined effort, reforged the Scepter of the Shifting Sands and struck the gong, looking to deal with the Qiraji threat once and for all. The forces the emperors had gathered spilled from the fortress and were met by the joint strength of the Alliance and Horde, led by High Overlord Varrock Saurfang. Under Saurfang's command, the Qiraji were contained in their fortress, and their attacks across the entirety of Kalimdor were quelled. Adventurers steeled themselves and entered Qiraji. They fought and slew many powerful foes, Rajax, Assyrian and Princess Huhuran to name just a few. Finally, they would reach the chamber of the monstrous Cthulhu at the very depths of the Qiraji hive. Before the heroes could fight the old god, they needed to deal with the Qiraji rulers. After a brutal struggle, where the adventurers cunningly separated the Twin Emperors, denying them their restorative power, the heroes were victorious, and the long reign of Vek'lor and Vek'Nilash came to a bloody end. So, there you have it, what we know of Vek'lor and his ancestry. I really hope you've enjoyed watching this episode, as much as I always do making them. If you liked any of the art, all the artists I could find are linked in the description below. If you want to help add to the 6 Gamers swarm, like, subscribe and share this video with your friends. We're dormant at the moment, but we'll rise and claim the world as our own. Of course, if you're one of the few remaining pesky Night Elf defenders, I'm sure you'll be hitting the dislike button. But there's only so long that you can hold out. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, happy Hearthstoning.